Hello everyone, this is James Shore with Let's Code Test-Driven JavaScript. I'm recording this on February 4th, 2014. You're watching the lab, which is where we explore, experiment, and just generally mess about. And today in the lab, we're going to look at CasperJS, a tool for scripting and testing PhantomJS, the headless web browser. The nice thing about PhantomJS is that it allows you to run tests against a real browser or a real browser engine without actually having to worry about having a full-fledged UI running and getting in your way. We use it in the live channel to do our smoke testing for WeWikiPaint, and we've also covered it in the Lessons Learned episode, number 13, where we look at how you can create smoke tests for your own code using PhantomJS. Now, PhantomJS had some issues, and CasperJS is said to resolve those issues, or at least to make using PhantomJS easier. PhantomJS is very bare bones. It's really just a JavaScript interface to WebKit, which is the engine that runs Safari and is the basis for the engine that runs Chrome. So it can be really useful to have sort of this JavaScript interface to WebKit. But PhantomJS is very, very low level, and CasperJS is said to give us a better interface. Now, so what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to try to take our exact code from Lessons Learned 13, where we use PhantomJS, and we're going to replace it with CasperJS and see what happens. My hypotheses are that CasperJS will make running tests more convenient. Right now, with PhantomJS, it's a little bit complicated getting the test to run. I hope that using CasperJS will make using real events more convenient. Right now, our PhantomJS code, the Lessons Learned episode showed how to do PhantomJS using simulated events through JavaScript and also using real events. I'm hoping CasperJS will make using the real events more convenient. And I'm hoping that CasperJS will make creating test suites more convenient. Now, if you're not familiar with PhantomJS, go ahead and check out that Lessons Learned episode. It's a pretty good one. But let me just give you a quick rundown of how it worked. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the episode here. And first off, the app that we're smoke testing in this episode is really drop dead simple. I'm going to go ahead and start it up here. You can download this code by going to the episode and clicking download code, or going to GitHub at the browse code link and forking it. But regardless, if you get this code, then what you'll find if you run it is that it is a really simple, straightforward test. This is a common example I like to use. What we have here is that if we click the link, the field turns pink because it wasn't valid. And if we put something in it and click the link, then we go to a different page, namely the Let's Code JavaScript homepage. So it's just that simple. The goal here isn't to have a really complicated app, but instead to just demonstrate basic smoke testing concepts. Now, smoke testing, if you don't remember what that is, again, go watch that Lessons Learned video. But as a reminder, it is a test that confirms that all the different pieces of your application are wired up correctly. It's not meant to do a thorough test of that your application works. Your unit tests and focused integration tests are supposed to do that. It's just making sure that everything's wired together correctly. So using something like PhantomJS or CasperJS is really useful because it runs against a real web browser. So it has to load a file off of a server, and it actually has to run JavaScript in the page in order for that test to pass. And that's what we're checking here. So what we're going to do is we're going to modify this code to work with PhantomJS. The way the existing code works is that we have this smoke test code right here that actually runs using NUnit. It starts our server, our node.js server, runs the tests by spawning PhantomJS, checks to see if we had an exit code equal to 0 or not, and then stops the server. And this is a little bit clunky. The fact that we have to run this in Node Unit, the fact that we have to check for this exit code is one of the things that I'm hoping that CasperJS will make more convenient for me. That is one of the hypotheses, is that CasperJS will make that more convenient. Now, this code right here, all it does is start PhantomJS. The actual PhantomJS test is here inside of phantomjs.js. And this is what's actually running PhantomJS. And you can see here what we're doing is we're saying open the page, and then we're running a couple of tests and getting some errors back out. Then we check to see if there's errors, and we exit with a 0, or we die, which exits with an error code if things didn't pass. And again, this is another thing that I'm hoping CasperJS will make more convenient. Right now, doing multiple tests, you have to do that all manually. So I'm hoping that CasperJS will make test suites more convenient. My hypothesis is that it will. And also, you'll see right here we have two ways of writing the test in PhantomJS. We have a test that just runs directly inside the browser, which is useful enough, I suppose, but not that much different than what we're doing in our unit tests. So it's actually taking this code and shipping it over to the browser and running everything right in the browser. And then we have this test here, this user interaction test, which actually sends a real OS level click event to WebKit, which simulates real world behavior a little bit better, and I think would actually do the mouse down and mouse up events in the browser that this test doesn't do. So another hypothesis is that I have is that CasperJS will make it much easier to do this kind of user interaction test where you're really sending real events to the browser. The reason I wouldn't normally do that with PhantomJS is because it's really complicated. You have to go in, find the location of the thing you're clicking in terms of its X and Y coordinates, then send the event, and then go back into the code to check it. So it's kind of clunky. So what I want to do is see CasperJS make all of these things more straightforward. Again, I'm hoping that it will make running tests more convenient. I'm hoping it will make using real events more convenient. And I'm hoping that it will make dealing with multiple tests and putting them into a test suite more convenient as well. So that is what we are about to check out right here in the lab. Thanks for joining me, and let's get started. Okay, now that we have everything downloaded, I'm going to make sure it works. I'm going to go ahead and run the build like that. The first time it runs, it will go ahead and download PhantomJS and do all that stuff. Runs Karma. This is an old version, but I'm not going to worry about that. And we're going to see it go, and then I'll run the build here. And there we go. Everything's working. And normally we won't run Karma. We'll just run the smoke test part because that's all we care about. Okay, now that we've got everything downloaded and working, let's go ahead and install CasperJS. That can be installed from NPM. They recommend that you install it globally, but as usual, I prefer to install it locally so that anybody who downloads this repository in the future can just have things work automatically. We don't have to worry about doing additional install steps. So I've got CasperJS installed, and let's go ahead and check that in. This does input binaries in your repository, so that's something to be careful about. I'm not going to worry about it here because we're not going to be doing a lot of changes, but it is sort of the downside, or a downside to CasperJS, and also the way NPM works is it does put 2 megabytes of stuff in your repo. Okay, so there's CasperJS installed. Let's see if we can get it to work. If I just run node modules bin CasperJS, it doesn't work. Okay, so our first challenge here is to get CasperJS running instead of PhantomJS. And CasperJS does depend on PhantomJS, but we've got a bit of a fly in the ointment here in that it looks like CasperJS is depending on it being on the path. So I can run PhantomJS like that, and it works just fine. But if I just type PhantomJS, it's not on the path, so it's not going to work. And it looks like CasperJS can't find it. Okay, digging into this a bit more, it looks like we can set a PhantomJS executable variable and have that work. So I'm going to give that a shot. Okay, let's see if that works. Oh, it does work. Okay, fantastic. So what we need to do is you have to export the PhantomJS executable environment variable in order for CasperJS to work. That should be good because when we run CasperJS within Node, we can set that executable a lot easier than we can change the path, I think. That is good. Okay, now that we've got this working from the command line, let's see if we can get it to work from our test code. Now, I'm not seeing, as I look through the documentation, I'm not seeing anything that makes CasperJS any easier to run for us than PhantomJS is, unfortunately. We will still need to spawn the CasperJS process using child process.spawn. We'll need to set some environment variables as well. Yeah, unfortunately, it's no easier. In fact, it's a little bit more difficult to run than CasperJS or than PhantomJS because of this need to set the PhantomJS executable. But I'm going to go ahead and start that. I'm going to add a test right here. I'll say test run CasperJS tests. And I'm going to bang on this for a bit and see if I can get this to work and actually run CasperJS. All right, as I look at this, I see another problem, which is that the CasperJS launcher is Python based. And so I'm wondering if this is going to work on Windows. It's working on my Mac because Python is on the path by default, but that is not true for Windows. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my Windows VM and try it there. Now let's try running node modules bin CasperJS here. Yeah, that did not work. Yeah, even if I run it directly out of here, it wants the .NET framework installed. So, and again, I like to be able to have my repository set up so that you install a fresh version of the OS, you download the repo, and you can run Jake, and everything just works. So CasperJS has some dependencies that I'm not liking here. I don't like the way that it requires you to have all this other stuff installed, which now means that you have to have instructions on how to build your app that's more than just run Jake or run Grunt or whatever your build tool is. Yeah, that PhantomJS is also a node module. The real PhantomJS is in lib phantom bin. Let's try that. And there we go. Yes. Okay. We've got it working. Fantastic. And that is working without us having any environment variables set on the command line, which again is the way I like it. I want my code to be able to download from the repo, press run, Jake or npm run or whatever, and have it just work. And so this is really good. All right, so that is the first challenge overcome. We do have CasperJS working, and it also answers our hypothesis. We thought that CasperJS would make running the tests more convenient from our automated build. The answer is no, it does not. Not only is it pretty much the same as running PhantomJS, it's actually worse because it requires PhantomJS to be on the path, and it doesn't work on Windows. Because you have to have Python installed and so forth. So I would say that in this respect, the hypothesis was wrong, and Casper is actually worse than PhantomJS. But we still have some other things left to try, so that is what we're going to do next. Next question I have is whether or not it makes running the test suites more convenient. Right now, we've got that sort of manually working here. I think Casper will give us a much better shot at it. So let's go ahead and give that a try. Okay, the first thing I want to do is just get a bare bones test module going. So I'm going to put that right next to PhantomJS here, and I'll call it the surprisingly named CasperJS.js. I am that original. And I guess the trick here is to, well, let's just say, hi, let's just have it say hi. And let's see if we can get this to run. So if I run the smoke test, we've got Casper running, but it's not actually running anything. So the next thing is to get it to run our file specifically, which is CasperJS. Hey, awesome. It worked. I forgot to exit, but that's easy enough. Okay, so there's our exit. Hopefully that will work. Yeah, yeah, that worked great. That's got Casper running, but we really want it to be running like a test. So let me see what I can see about that. Okay, so running tests with Casper, running test suites is actually a whole subcommand. What you have to do is do casper.test begin. And you don't say exit. Now, if I run this, it will fail because I'm not telling it to run a test. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the runner to say test at the beginning. And it's saying it doesn't like the Casper instance, so I think maybe we don't need this Casper. Just have to make it a global, I suppose. Okay, there it's running. All right, so what we have here is we do have a test working. It's pretty straightforward. We just say casper.test.begin, and then that's how we define our test. The output is kind of verbose, but you can see it here. It's really noisy, in fact. I haven't looked into whether or not that can be changed, but my previous run through of the documentation didn't indicate anything like that. At any rate, that is it. And again, the way we made this work was we had to tell Casper, the Casper runner, that we were running tests, and then we pass in our test. It all worked quite nicely. This is definitely more convenient than what we've got going on here. We'll see what happens when we actually get the test in there, but so far, so promising. So our next challenge is to actually run the same test that we're running in PhantomJS. Again, what this is doing is it's just clicking the link and then confirming that we're getting the required field. It's a very simple test, so it hopefully won't be a whole lot of work. The assertions that they have here are pretty good. They're definitely the kinds of things that you would want for looking inside of web pages. Let's go ahead and see if we can copy our test. I'm just going to take our existing test and copy it over to CasperJS and comment it out just so we can follow the flow. And so what we're going to do, in order to do anything with Casper, we need to say casper.start. Then we say .then and pass in a function to do something. And then we continue doing that, and eventually we say .run at the end, and then we say test.done. That is the way Casper likes to do things, and that's how it deals with the fact that that's how it sort of creates a more convenient way of dealing with all the asynchronicity that's required when you're dealing with PhantomJS. So let's see how this works. That should work, and it does, so that's good. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is get the text field and the submit link. All right, I didn't see an easy way of pulling out the text field and submit link, but you know what? I don't actually think we need to do that. All we need to do is just click the submit link, and Casper has a really convenient way of doing that. What we do is we say this.click within this function, and then we pass in the selector. So in this case, it'd be a submit link. And that's pretty much all there is to it. At least I thought that was all there was to it. That failed. It says there is no submit link selector. Oh, well, I don't think I've loaded the page yet. Okay, good. It failed, but that's only because we didn't actually do any assertions. So that's good. So we've clicked it. Then what we need to do is evaluate it. We need to see if the required field class actually showed up. Actually, before I do that, it looks like I found something even more convenient. I should be able to say then click submit link. Now it wants a function, but let's see if it's necessary. Well, that's promising. Okay. Now what we need to do is, again, we need to look at the text field and see if it has the class we're looking for. All right, it looks like what we can do is we can use this assert exists to basically check to see if the text field exists with the class we're expecting. It's a little bit of a tricky way of doing it. Rather than getting the text field and then looking at the class, what we're doing is just looking to see if an element with the ID and class we want exists. But I think that's an appropriate way of doing this. So let's say assert exists, and the selector is going to be text field, and then the class is going to be required field class. Now we can't actually do example.required field class because this isn't running in the browser, so we don't have example. We could try loading it. Actually, no, before we do that, let's just hard code it for now. Okay, let's see if this works. This might actually work. And it does. And let's see what happens if we don't click the link. Then the field should not exist. Oh, that's fantastic. That's really great. Wow, okay, this is good. This is way better than our other code. I love the way this reads. We start the URL, then click the link, and then assert that it exists. The only way it would be better, I think, is if there was some way of doing a then assert similar to then click, but that's kind of a nit. And that's the whole test, because this wasn't a really complicated test. So yeah, the signs are really good here. Now I'm going to see if I can load in this example here. Oh, I figured it out. Example.js is not a CommonJS module, so I can't require it because it's not exporting anything. But that's all right. I did enough experimentation to see that I could have required it and it would have worked. So yeah, this works great. And we could eliminate this duplication if example.js was a CommonJS module, but it's not. And that's okay for this little simple example. But overall, this is really clean. I like this a lot. In my research, I found that then click basically does the same thing that our first example does. This is a simulated mouse click. What I'd like to do is to do the same thing that our other PhantomJS test does, which is actually find the location of the button and click it using a real OS level event. And Casper does make that possible. So let's go ahead and do that as well. So we'll start out the same way by visiting the URL, and then rather than clicking it, what we need to do is find the button. Okay, this is really convenient. There's a get element bounds, which will automatically get the location of the element for us. So in PhantomJS, what we do is we get the location by evaluating some code in the page to get the bounds, but here we can do the exact same thing much simpler. And that is great. So we'll get the bounds for our submit link. You can also assert that it's not null, because the get element bounds will return null if the selector isn't found. Okay, it looks like there's no not null, so we'll just say it's truthy. Then once we have that, we're going to want to actually click the link using the mouse. By default, Casper uses JavaScript events. Is there a way to force it to use regular events? OS level events, that is. It falls back to OS level events See, it says here, it first tries to trigger a mouse event, then it uses a native Qt WebKit event, which is what I'm calling an OS level event. Is there any way to force it? All right, it doesn't look like there's a way to force a OS level event. I guess what we'll do is here we'll click by element, and here we'll click by coordinates just to compare the two directly. Although the first one is basically the same thing and it's a lot simpler, so we would never do that in a real world example. So for that, it would just be a matter of saying Casper.click submit button bounds dot top and left. And then we have the same assertion as we had before. Okay, that didn't work because Casper.click requires a selector. What we can do here is we can use the mouse object directly and tell it to click, and that will take an X and a Y coordinate. Okay, and that didn't work because I got these backwards. X and Y, not Y and X. And there we go. Okay, let's see if we can clean this up a little bit. Don't need this. This can be renamed to bounds. All right. Let's see if we can pull out this Casper.start repetition. See what happens. Yeah, okay. That is pretty nice, and we don't need a tear down. Well, that brings us to the end of our third and final challenge, which was, does Casper make using real events more convenient? And the answer to that is no, it doesn't make using real events more convenient, but it does making writing tests way more convenient. I mean, look how compact this is. We do have really nice test suites. I mean, this is exactly the same as this code, and it is just so much better in so many ways. Casper is automatically taking care of all this setup for us. It's simplifying each of these three things that we're worrying about into a much more compact piece of code. It's dealing with all of this. It's handling our errors for us. Bottom line is that if you want to do tests with PhantomJS, Casper is definitely the way to go. It is a huge improvement. And even for WeWikiPaint, where we're doing all of our drawing on the screen, I still think that Casper would have been a better choice for us than PhantomJS, or rather, would have been just as good as PhantomJS and would have been more compact and better. Now, the one flaw with Casper is definitely the way you run it, because it does have this problem on Windows where it's going to depend on Python. Now, in my research, I did find that there is a way to run Casper within PhantomJS. I'm not sure how that would work with the whole test module, though. So that is a potential problem. That is the one fly in the ointment, is that it's not super easy to run Casper on Windows in a way where you can just take a raw Windows installation and have everything run. But as far as the actual test suite goes and the ability to make testing easy, Casper is fantastic. It definitely has some quirks. It's pretty complicated. I found the documentation to be very thorough, which is good, but also kind of difficult to find my way around in because there was so much. But that is actually kind of a good thing. You want to have lots of documentation. So bottom line, Casper is really excellent. I definitely encourage you to use it in your own projects. And that brings us to the end of this lab. Thanks for joining me. This has been all about CasperJS. Once again, great tool. The one fly in the ointment is if you're trying to do Windows-based stuff and you want your builds to work without having to require the OS to have additional software installed. That is just a minor nit. It's important for me. It probably isn't important for most people. Other than that, though, Casper really does help a lot when you're trying to do stuff with PhantomJS. I highly recommend it. Thanks for joining me, and I will catch you next time.